Katie Strang has been covering this testimony for the course of the past week, doing terrific work for The Athletic. Detroit joins us now on the phone. Katie, I know it's been an emotional 7-8 days for everybody inside the courtroom. Bring us inside the courtroom and describe what the emotion was like after the sentencing was read.
Yeah, I think it really spanned, a wide swath of emotions, which I think is ironic because I think that's what has been conspicuously absent from MSU's response to this situation, is that sort of baseline of human emotion. I think you saw relief and joy and validation. I think a sense of closure might be going a bit too far. I think it's important to remember that so many of these survivors will live with what, was done to them for the rest of their lives. But certainly there was a sense of triumph on a day that was really the culmination of years and decades of abuse and finally a reckoning for the man who was responsible for all of that.
And without question, one of the most emotional moments today was when the judge read a letter which Nassar wrote after agreeing to a guilty plea on 10 counts of first-degree criminal sexual conduct. Now, in the letter, Nassar's tone suggested a conspiracy against him as opposed to any responsibility on his part, and the judge made it clear that his failure to admit guilt would affect her sentencing. Here's a portion of that moment from the courtroom.
I was a good doctor because my treatments worked, and those patients that are now speaking out were the same ones that praised and came back over and over and referred family and friends to see me. The media convinced them that everything I did was wrong and bad. They feel I broke their trust. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned.
Katie, we could hear the audible oohs and ahs after part of that letter was read. I read it today with a sense of incredulity. I could not believe that Nassar had actually written that. How was that received inside the courtroom?
Yeah, I think you definitely captured sort of the essence of the reaction. In fact, you can probably hear, one of my guffaws. I'm sure it was one of the loudest. I was shocked, and it was just sort of an involuntary reaction to that line. I think what it shows is this is a very sick man who was a master manipulator, who preyed upon people and exploited and ingratiated himself and groomed his victims. And I think there was a real hope from some of those survivors that he would show remorse and regret for what he had done. He did at one point briefly apologize to them, and that really actually did resonate. And then, when the judge read that letter, it really sort of nullified any of that sort of emotion from the initial apology. I think what it did was reveal him to be the type of guy that he is, which is strident and manipulative and unremorseful and delusional, quite frankly, to think that this is in any way a conspiracy against him, or that anything that he did under the guise of medical treatments was legitimate in any way.
Yeah, as you mentioned, just before being sentenced, Nassar did invoke his right to address the court, speak directly to his accusers. There was something of an admission of guilt from Nassar, yet the statement itself began almost incomprehensibly with Nassar describing how much he'd been affected by the testimony. Here's a portion of that statement.
Your words these past several days, your words have had a significant emotional effect on myself and is shaking to my core. I also recognize that what I am feeling pales in comparison to the pain, trauma, and emotional destruction that all of you are feeling. There are no words that can describe the depth and breadth of how sorry I am for what has occurred. An acceptable apology
Sir, you need to stay at the microphone or they can't hear you.
An acceptable apology to all of you is impossible to write and convey. I will carry your words with me for the rest of my days.
Katie, full disclosure here, we had a debate as to whether we should grant Larry Nassar the time on this show to be heard as he was giving that statement. And I'm guessing a lot of people in the courtroom felt that same way. We saw him turn around and directly face some of his accusers. What was their reaction to when he did that and to when he read that statement?
You know, I talked to one of the survivors who, you know, was really overcome with emotion when she saw that. And I think what it was is perhaps not quite a direct reaction to that, but really just sort of a groundswell of emotion from, you know, the highs and lows throughout this week, and that, you know, sort of spilling over. I did talk to Kyle Stevens, who was the first, you know, woman that spoke publicly in court last week, and she had said that she had sort of given a fleeting thought to, you know, forgiveness and to whether Nassar was remorseful at all, and that was essentially, I mean, that I guess she was no longer harboring that thought as soon as the letter was read. I think any sort of equity that he might have, you know, carved out for himself very quickly dissipated.
Katie Strang, managing editor, senior writer of The Athletic Detroit, doing terrific work this week. Very difficult topic to cover. Katie, we appreciate all your work and you joining us today.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.